In April of 2008, the Pujanet Yagya group sponsored a series of Yagyas in Kanchipuram, Tamil Nadu, South India. These Yagyas took place at a time when the Vedic planets Rahu and Ketu were changing signs, with Rahu moving to Capricorn and Ketu moving to Cancer. The times during which planets change signs is traditionally a time when rituals called Yagyas are exceptionally effective. Kanchipuram is known as a temple town, and there are literally hundreds of temples in the area, each with its own special story. Most famous are the Ekambeshwara Shiva temple and the Kamakshi Devi temple. But there are many, many temples, perhaps less famous, but certainly interesting, and each one significant in its own right. The Vishnu Purana contains a famous story about the time when the gods needed to churn the ocean of milk in order to obtain the nectar of immortality, or Amrita. These images are from the Bangkok airport, and they show the story very elegantly. The demons used Mount Mandara as the churn, and Vasuki, the king of the Nagas or snakes, as the rope. The demons took one end and the Devas took the other, but as soon as the mountain was placed on the water, it began to sink. And so Vishnu assumed the form of a turtle and supported the mountain on his back. Here in this rendition you see the turtle and also Vishnu dancing on the top of the mountain. After the churning was completed, a Naga snuck into the line to drink the nectar, but was apprehended by the sun and the moon, who had been watching from above. They sounded an alarm, and Vishnu threw his Sudarshana chakra at the snake and cut its head off. But he was too late, as a drop of the nectar had already been swallowed. As you might imagine, the snake was not very pleased with the sun and the moon, and so periodically he swallows them up, and we experience that as the time of an eclipse. Rahu swallows the sun, and Ketu swallows the moon. But because they were cut into two pieces, the sun and the moon come out again, and everything is fine. In the end, the gods had their nectar and became divine, while the demons were left with nothing. Vishnu, however, was still in the form of the turtle, so he journeyed to Kanchipuram, which is a special place for Shiva, and made a small lingam out of sand and performed puja to ask for Shiva's help in destroying his turtle form and restoring him to his usual pleasing form, which of course Shiva was happy to do. There is now a temple on that spot, and the sand lingam has been carefully preserved. All Shiva temples have an area for the 9 planets, Navagraha, and at least a small Rahu Ketu area, but this temple is different. There is a huge and very old peepal tree, under which there are well over 300 small statues of Rahu Ketu. When I visited the temple during Shivaratri, it was obvious that this was a place of great power, and it was easy to decide to do a big puja and abhishekam in honor of the time during which Rahu and Ketu changed signs. All of the temples in Kanchipuram are busy, and this particular area in this temple is no exception. So not only would we be benefiting ourselves, but would also be good service for the temple and for the community at large. The entire area was cleaned, and every one of the idols was washed with water, and then sesame oil was applied. Milk was offered, and then turmeric, which is cleansing and purified, was poured over it, and then sandal paste. Afterwards, some decorations of kumkum were added, and a small flower mala decorated each one. Finally, a special pujas were done for Shiva, who often sits in the shade of a many-headed snake. The temple was thrilled with our efforts because it had been a very long time, several years actually, since this area of the temple had been so thoroughly and nicely cleaned with proper pujas performed. On the second day, our priests went out into the countryside to repeat the process at a fairly new Rahu Ketu temple. Those who have seen the Shivaratri photos will recognize this temple as the place where we performed part of the Shivaratri Yagyas. There's a beautiful Shiva lingam here, and also a smaller temple area for Rahu Ketu. A fine abhishekam was performed, and the 2 murtis were decorated very nicely. After the abhishekam, a traditional Vedic fire yagya was performed, For Rahu and Ketu, with the traditional offerings of wood and ghee, many of the villagers gathered to watch and enjoy the Yagya performance. And on the final of the 3 days, our own pundits performed a 5-hour private Yagya for our sponsors at our own facility in Kanchipuram, and an additional day is scheduled for April 17th in Varanasi, North India, on the banks of the Ganges River.